like to think every edition of the Comedy Slab is special, but this one has got a special number, not only with a 0 on the end, but it's... actually, what is it, Shane? You had some fancy term for it. How many episodes we've done?
I wanted to do around the horn and go, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the sesquicentennial edition of the Comedy Slab.
Sesquipetary, what is it?
Sesquicentennial, which is SESQUICEN tennial.
Well, it's only because I happen to know it's the 150th edition that I'd have a clue, really, but that doesn't sound like it naturally means that. But hey, who are we to argue? So thank you for the rousing introduction. That was Shane O'Connor, who's in the Midlands of England. I'm in the southeast thereof. I'm Adrian Lacey. And together we have a little show here each week called The Comedy Slab. It's a notional slab on which we put a different comedy each week, be it TV, radio, or internet, or podcast, digital, call it what you will. But it's just one episode, and it's 2 impressions of, not impersonations, I mean, of one say, and it's a kind of snapshot on the day of how we feel about it. But anyway, just put his hand up. I can see him on Skype, 170 miles away. What is it, Shane?
O'Connor at the back. So somebody, and forgive me, I can't remember who it was, but on Twitter the other day made the very good point, and they said it's a shame that you have to decide just based on one episode. And I think you're absolutely. We found this, haven't we?
Yeah,
that does factor into it, and probably not in a good way all the while. But yeah, I thought it was a really good point, well made, actually.
But then, if you think what the alternative approach could be, which is we're at episode 150 now, if we'd have to multiply up 150 times the number of series of each show we've slabbed times the number of episodes of each show in each of those series, I think we wouldn't have an awful lot of life left, and neither would our listeners, frankly.
No, or a lot of life left in us, would we? Really, we'd be exhausted. But yeah. I just thought it's right, and I think, and I've gone on to do this, and I've just finished watching. The second, I watched the first series, which we slabbed one of, and then I've watched the second series of Back with Mitchell and Webb, and you know, I mean, if I'd have had to slab it now on what I know now, I'd have probably given it, you know, a 4.5 or a 5 because I thoroughly enjoyed it. But
right, that's a series mark. But these things are kind of they stay sort of. I don't know, what is it, preserved in aspic kind of thing. Yeah. There was also talking of audience reaction, because we do care and we do listen to and read audience reaction. That reaction, a completely different show, edition of the Comedy Slab, and a different show we were slabbing, which was Dave Gorman on, what was it, Dave? Some comment about that we were being very harsh. I don't really want to dig into it because it's opening up the whole file.
I wasn't being harsh at all. I quite liked it.
Yeah. Well, I also thought, I would have said nice things about it because I have a lot of respect for Dave Gorman. I just felt he's a hybrid of comic and he's a little bit journalistic-y around the edges. And I think if you do that, that's why because the listener or whoever got in touch, of course, sorry, I don't have your name in front of me. It was via Twitter, wasn't it? Of course, you are, it goes without saying, as entitled to your views as we are. But I felt, and you said he's just an entertainer, and I felt, well, he's not just an entertainer. That's why I took the approach I did. I could have gone on about a printer that he laid into on the show, Dave Gorman, on a different edition of the show that I'd seen back in the days when it was TB dinners with me and my wife. And I have that exact same printer. And I mean, gosh, we'd be going down a whole rabbit warren. But I didn't agree what he said about the printer. I know there's jokes there. He's got to get the audience laughing. But also, I felt there's a bit of, I don't know, the shaman or the magician or, I don't know, what would you call it?
The showman.
Well, showman and shaman, they sound similar, but they are different things. I felt there was a little bit of snake oil being sold there where he's sort of having it both ways. He's saying, I'm an entertainer, and by the way, I want you to take this as fact. because that's how I present my show. And the whole show collapses if you don't believe a word he's saying, of course. So there is that factual element. Anyway, I've got that off my chest, sort of. But reaction always welcome, whether it's flattering or otherwise. Anyway, so what are we slabbing? Well, for edition 150, we are looking at the very first edition of Fawlty Towers, which has, amongst other things, it's won numerous awards over the years. But a couple of years ago, the Radio Times, was it the readership or whatever, voted it the top British sitcom of all time. Well, yeah, what did you think? Let's do our regular thing, even though it's a slightly irregular edition. Formula remains the same. What did you think? Did your heart sink, as I said, Fawlty Towers?
I relished the opportunity to put it on the slab, actually, because, as I said last week, I nearly didn't keep my powder dry, or got it at least
it was hinted at, wasn't it?
I got a little bit wet, yeah. This kind of like the best comedy of all time really kind of winds me up. But I have some theories on that, which I'll hopefully, if we get the time, we'll expand on a little bit later. So yeah, because of that, I kind of really, relish the opportunity to get stuck into it. But this is a show that isn't without its controversy now, which is, like everything seems to have, doesn't it, these days? Particularly anything that comes out of the 1970s is going to be tinged with some kind of controversy. And of course, recently, we had this situation where the BBC chopped a whole scene out, didn't they, of one of the episodes because of the character of the Major using the N-word. And I just find it quite interesting. I don't know whether is revisionist history, is that the best way to deal with this kind of situation now, or do we leave it intact and go? What's the thing they do now? Announcers, they say
it contains material that's very much of its time, or
or
a sort of euphemistic phrase.
Yeah, and deals with themes and language and all the rest of it, as you say, that are very much of its time, but. I don't know whether would you just bleep it out? Would you take the scene out entirely? I don't know. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, how you deal with this kind of thing? Yeah,
if it was me, my first reaction was I would have bleeped it. But I find even the phrase revisionist history you could question, because isn't all history revisionist history?
Well, yeah, they do say as well, don't they, that history is written by the winners. I'm sure I'm paraphrasing and murdering that
or
phrase.
Or written
there
by
well.
Michael Winner, I think they said.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just did a little bit of research about this, about the N-word in particular, which was the troublesome part of this particular episode. And for example, I didn't realise this, but in Huckleberry Finn, it's used 200 times. So, do you rip the pages out of that book, or do you? I think they've reprinted a book in about 20 years ago, I think, where they changed the N-word to the word slave, I think. But then it loses its original meaning. Is that fair enough? Because if it doesn't offend people, it's massive, isn't it? This thing. How do you deal with something that was acceptable? Well, whether it was acceptable, it must have been acceptable then, because it went out on the BBC. It's no good saying, "Oh, well, it wasn't," but they put it out anyway. It obviously was acceptable because it passed all the broadcasting standards. So,
or thought acceptable by the powers that be. Yeah.
That's about the same thing, doesn't it? Really, but so then, because it was acceptable then and it's not acceptable now, what do you do with it? And I find it fascinating.
So, to the matter in hand, Fawlty Towers. I was trying to think myself into how the world might have received this. On the one hand, as I viewed it, I thought, well, Series 1, Episode 1, I'm sure most people would know, and those that don't will Google. It's set in a hotel. It was actually inspired by a real hotelier that John Cleese, I believe, was on the receiving end of. He described this guy, I think it was a hotel in Torquay, which is notionally, isn't that roughly where Fawlty Towers is set, or somewhere down?
Yes, it is, maybe, yeah. Torquay,
he said that this hotel was run by the most delightfully rude man I'd ever met. And that is that contradiction of rude and delightful that I suppose it inspires the comedy, because if it was just awful and there was no light to be shone on it, then that wouldn't really make comedy. It'd just be tragedy, I guess. But of course, no one was coming to, or very few people have been coming to this with a completely blank slate because, we get back to our old friends Monty Python, oft mentioned, and they've been mentioned in the same breath as top comedy, blah, 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 all time, et cetera, top British comedy. And of course, it went into the film world. And once you go into film, you tend to go outside the UK as well. So people wouldn't have had a blank slate with John Cleese, would they? So what I mean is that there's a hell of a lot hanging on it for him. And famously, I remember him saying on maybe it was in the Psychiatrist Chair radio show with Dr. Anthony Clare interviewing him, or one of those kind of shows. He said, I think his psychiatrist was in the audience for at least one edition of the show, which I don't know. Some people might find that reassuring, but to look out in the seething mass of humanity, it might be the least reassuring face you could see. But there was a lot hanging on it, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, also, I just a bit of sort of context in terms of what was on the TV around that time. It would have been vying for a slot. 1975. This is things like "Get Some In." Do you remember that with Tony Selby and Robert Lindsay?
I don't think I ever watched a whole one, but I remember the title because my dad used to be intrigued by it.
It was set in national service with the RAF regiment, wasn't it? Which is quite an interesting concept. But also, The Good Life was on. The Cuckoo Waltz, which was probably the only time that you saw Lewis Collins in a comedy, unless you count The Professionals, which has been a bit unkind.
You just throw that in, ironically.
And one that we slabbed it started in 1975, was Sinden and Stritch in Two's Company. So that was the kind of the backdrop of TV in 75.
And we should tell people for the first time, if they're enviably young, that you had a choice of 3 channels, one of which could be on strike from time to time. So
they took it in turns, didn't they? They're like a rotor for striking. And if you were really posh, then you had a colour telly as well. I mean, this is a concept that kids of today they don't know. They're born, do they? They have no idea.
I mean, you mentioned YouTube in passing. I think we're possibly what goes around comes around as regards debates about editorial oversight and censorship and so on. I don't want to dig into that because it's a massive area, but you can see how we're moving towards, I think, a world in which, where they've just claimed, we're just a platform, we don't want to censor content. Actually, you are producers of content and, blah, blah, blah. So that's a whole other interesting area. But, I
mean, the other thing is as well, I've got to add as well, it's like we don't want to censor content unless it disagrees with our political persuasions, in which case we will, which is even worse, isn't it, really?
Yes, yeah. I'm just going to agree because I don't want to censor you. So, thank you for the historical context. You've clearly either you've got a fantastic memory, or you've gone to the said producers of online content to research that. So
neither. I've got a back catalogue of TV Times.
Have you? I could believe your entire house is full of back episodes.
I am the nightmare hoarder from next door. You can see my episode next week.
I don't wish to look at your episodes, madam. Well, we as viewers have to get up to speed pretty quickly, but I would argue that they're so beautifully characterised, well drawn, I think is a favourite actor's phrase, that I think you know where you are pretty soon. So you wouldn't have been given a lot of context at the time if you were sitting down for the first time to see Series 1, Episode 1. So to our first clip. So to improve the class of the hotel, of course, so Cleese wants to improve the class of the clientele. But we have, shall we say, delicately, this customer here in this clip is not to the manor born. He's not. It doesn't sound Eton educated. Sybil wants to be very welcoming and so on, but Cleese has got a bee in his bonnet about someone who might drop their H's or something like that. So this is why there's a slight difference between how the married couple and not so happily married couple approach this customer.
You have luggage, sir?
Just one case. In the car, the white sports.
Fill this in, would you, sir?
If you can.
Hope you enjoy your stay, Mr. Brown.
Manuel, would you fetch this gentleman's case from the car outside, take it to room 7?
He's not easy for me.
What?
He's not easy for me, entender.
Ah, it's not easy for you to understand. Manuel, we're training him. He's from Barcelona. In Spain. Obtenir la valisa,
okay?
La valisa en el auto bianco sportif y a la sala 7, por favor. Pronto?
He's impossible. What? He's impossible,
Look, it's
entender.
perfectly simple!
Manuel, si va, si busca mi equipaje que está en el automóvil blanco y lo trae a la sala número 7.
Señor habla español.
Oh, solo un poco, lo siento. No. Pero he olvidado mucho.
No, señor, habla muy bien, formidable.
Gracias, gracias.
I do like the way, as you say, they draw the characters very quickly. It's like with a line and with a gag as well, you know. Oh, we're training him. He's from Barcelona in Spain, because he didn't think you'd know. But so they, like you say, they managed to just like set that so you knew exactly what you were dealing with. I have to say, Sachs is just awesome, isn't he? I mean, I didn't realise how much of a show stealer he is.
It's also the physicality of him being short. I'm sure he was cast for that to look all. In that context, all the more ridiculous with John Cleese's height, which both are using that physicality. And at one point later in the show, Basil's bending down to Manuel, and then Manuel bends down as well.
Yeah.
So they're both sort of stooped.
I do think, I kind of get the impression that he spends more time with his knees bent and his back bent than he does like standing straight.
I think you're right.
Andrew Sachs, yeah. A headline?
Yeah, of course. You're not going to get off the hook.
It isn't as drastic as it first sounds, but my headline would be Fawlty but seldom Towers.
Okay.
But yeah, it's to me, I mean, it is overrated. There's no question about it. And like I say, there are some theories about that, but I don't know. I kind of tire of them. You know, one of the funniest comedies of all time, and it wins Best Comedy. It's good. There's no question, but I'm not sure it's up there with the best ever. Are you?
I would say, yeah, having guffawed a few times, and I've sat sadly stony-faced through too many shows that we put on the Slab. You know, I'm always banging on about the smile com. Well, if it is a smile com, then smiles are sufficient. But this was definitely. Being a studio-based sitcom, this was definitely going for laughs. You don't have your audience sitting there just smiling. And I have to say, I was prepared to you know, there is the risk. The higher you build something up, the more likely it can be to fall. But no, I really thought this was a quality product. I felt confident in the hands of the writers. John Cleese and Connie Booth, who were at one stage married, but by the time they did this, I believe they had separated. But clearly, one imagines they had a constructive enough relationship. They must have spent some serious hours together writing it. So that sets a nice tone from the outset. I don't know that there should be a number one sitcom. How, you know. Everyone has their favourites. I might have a favourite this week that's different next week. So, I mean, that's a bit of a nonsense, but it's something to write about in the Radio Times and the newspapers. And I lap it up as well. So, you know, if it's nonsense that I'm party to and enjoy. So, I wasn't disappointed, I have to say. I mean, not flawless, but enjoyed and thought it was worthy of a very strong reputation.
Because there are a number of things at play here, aren't there, as well? I mean, as you say, I mean, it's from 1975, first off. So it's had to have quite a journey through time to get where we are here.
As have we.
As have we, yes. Look
we
at the state we're in. But, yeah, so there's that aspect of it. You know, has it worn particularly well, maybe? Or I don't know. I do wonder how much of you enjoying it, and I suffer from this as well. This is the thing that I can never separate. How much of you enjoying it is because it's like putting on an old comfy pair of slippers, and you know it so well, and it's that lovely, warm, fuzzy nostalgia thing going on as well.
Well, I don't know that I do know it so well. I can't be sure that I'd ever seen this episode before because I was probably taking homework too seriously in those days. But I do remember quite often walking home with friends who would quote it. And thanks to Gary for suggesting this, and he sort of implied, not in not so many words, it is very quotable, and he is one of the quoters. And I always admired people's skill on that, but very often they were talking about a show I hadn't seen. And in those days, it wasn't a case of going to the iPlayer and catching up at the weekend. That was it. You had to wait for a repeat, which might be years off if it ever came for some shows. Obviously, this has had quite a few outings, I would think. Well, I know for a fact, but. No, so I don't think I can just dismiss it that quickly, or that you could dismiss it for me, in the sense that for me it's just that comfort factor. Look, everything's got a context, and I have a notion of who John Cleese might be, both offset and then as an actor. And I have to say, I admired his acting. I thought everyone was strong. I don't think there were any weak links there. So I think I'm going to dig in a bit on that one. So I do think it's a quality product.
I mean, although having said that, you would concede that you know the character, even if you don't know the episode. You know the character, you know the situation, you know the relationship between him and his wife, you know the relationship between him and Manuel. So you and once you've got that under your belt, you know what's coming, don't you?
Yeah, but, well, what you're saying is I can't possibly think myself into the situation of someone who's never seen it before or never seen the show, never mind that episode. And yes and no. I would say I did my best, as much as is humanly possible, to try and wipe the slate clean. But, I can tell from your general demeanour and tone that you don't quite believe that I can do that very effectively. I'm not claiming to be able to do it. You'd have to wipe every memory in your head, which would be quite worrying because you'd go completely gaga and have no idea who you were or whether you were around in those days. So, yeah, there is no perfect way of doing it. But trust me, I did my best under the circumstances.
No, I'm saying the same for me as well. But I'm only making the point that there has to be a nostalgic element to it, doesn't there? Because we both know what it is. We weren't there going, oh, Fawlty Towers, I've never seen that before. I wonder what that's like.
Yes.
Is it that hilarious tall man? Where is it set? A hospital? I can't quite remember. So it wasn't that, was it really? But I'm not saying, it's not critical. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. But I'm just saying that is, as a fact, that is where I came to it from as well. What surprised me was how, I didn't enjoy, having put it under the sort of scrutiny of the spotlight, as it were. I didn't enjoy it as I found a lot of it very overplayed.
It's very theatrical. They're large performances, aren't they?
Do you know exactly the word I used in my notes? Very theatrical. The way that it's written, the way that it's performed, the way that it was filmed, because it was all done pretty well in, what was it, 2 or 3 takes? Do you think 2 or 3? Scenes, as it were? Well,
I'm, of course, far too young to have worked on that show, but having worked on some big-name sitcoms at TV Centre, every actor wants to nail it in the first take if they can. But, yeah, it wouldn't be a ridiculous number of takes. Very occasionally you have a sequence that's perhaps a bit physically complicated, and that might take a few goes. But, no, I think you're probably right. I'm only guessing, but, yeah. They'd go for take 2 or 3 each time.
Is it interesting? Because from an actor's point of view, there was only one line that I think, and it was Cleese that muffed it, wasn't he? When he was talking about a couple of horses, and he went a couple of hoo-ha horses.
Oh, but that was a deliberate fluff, wasn't it?
I don't think it was. I think that was a blooper. I think it was because he kind of.
Wasn't he reaching for another word beginning with H, which made sense in the context of the story? I know I've forgotten the story now, but as you've picked this out of context.
Yeah, but I mean, he wouldn't have said horses, would he? Because he wouldn't. that was you'd think of something else other than horse, but he kind of went hoo-ha horse. He got a couple of hoo-ha horses.
But it needed a hoo-ha, didn't it? I wish I could remember what word he's initially going for.
I'd have to watch it back because I took that as a blooper, to be honest with you. But if you had been the sound man, I don't know if you noticed. I mean, I'm surprised he worked after this show. Did you see all the booms in shot and the shadows of the boom?
You're blaming the sound person, right? It takes two to tango. There are pictures there that might be a bit wider than in rehearsal, or the lighting director has to help with shadows. They are the there was one lighting director called the Prince of Darkness, but that might be from an embittered sound man. You never know.
I think you'll find that crap actually travels downwards.
Couldn't possibly comment. But yeah, if you see a boom in shot, then is it the boom operator? Is it the actor not hitting their mark? Is it the shot size being different to rehearsal? Anyway, I merely raised the question. I'm sounding horribly defensive now, and I know you're not.
I was going to say, are you sure it wasn't you?
I'm quite sure. But just a little detail, and I hope I've got this right. I think this was in the same studio, Studio 6 at Television Centre, as was. Sadly, doesn't exist anymore. And that's another story for another day, perhaps. But same studio that Monty Python were in, if I remember correctly, and I think I do. So there's a nice little thing there, but that might also that can go either way, can't it? Because you do hear actors say, actors of the modern age think, oh gosh, this is where my big hero did his big entrance, or she did that, and so on. And actually, that can go either way, can't it? You can either go with the resonance and feel you're being buoyed by it, or you can be terrified by it.
I thought it was quite interesting that John Howard Davies, the co-director. Of this episode of the two series, in actual fact, actually worked. He would have worked with Cleese because he worked on Python as the director. He was the director on Monty Python.
Oh, right. Well, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of thing. And you notice that the longer people are in show business and tend to be the more successful ones, I think they like to build a family around them. It's all about trust, isn't it? And if you've hit on a winning formula.
And relationships, isn't it, as well? You don't want to have to start a relationship from new on a new comedy, and so everything's bedding in at the same time. And you kind of think, well, if you know the producer and the director, and you've worked with them before, and as you say, you trust them and you know them, it's comfort. You haven't got to worry about that, then, have you? You can
one less anxiety. Yeah. I mean, I'm clearly not the best person to do this, but I'm just that warm pair of slippers, aren't I? Bizarrely.
Yeah.
Which is why you're always stamping on me with your Dunlops, which we met the other week.
As if I would.
Have you got the Dunlops on now?
Yeah, I've got them on now. So I'll tell you what, I should be off around the track after this. I'll tell you straight away.
Warm cocoa to follow.
Can I mention the guy who played Lord Mulberry?
Yeah.
Melbury, wasn't it? Melbury, wasn't it? I think. Which was really sad, actually, because very often you look at it's a guy called Michael Gwynn, and he died of a heart attack some 6 or 7 months after making this. He died the following year, in the January the following year, and he only reached the age of 59. He'd had a fantastic career in theatre and film and all the rest of it. And in actual fact, I think a couple of years before, he'd actually in a sitcom called Albert and Victoria, which was, I think, was an Alfred Marks vehicle, not the recruitment agency, the actor. And for those of you old enough to remember,
well, but weren't they the same person, or am I being incredibly naive? I wonder whether that was a side hustle.
I didn't know. Oh, I've got to look that up now.
I've worried you. Google that later. I've worried myself though, so I don't know the answer.
But he played a character called Lord Maybury, believe it or not, some 2 years previously.
But did you feel, actually, it's funny you should say that. I thought he mispronounced it first time through, or so, there didn't quite seem to be a uniformity of pronouncing his name.
Melbury, was it?
Yeah,
Melbury?
I thought someone said, or maybe even he, when he announced himself. In fact, we're going to hear him in the clip. Shall we hear the clip now? Would that be good?
Okay, yeah. He might well call himself Lord Mulberry.
Yeah,
or will he be,
or I might have got cloth ears and misheard it. But
will he be beating about the bush?
Okay. Moving swiftly on. It's a bit like the Earl of Wimbledon, I felt, the Fast Show character.
Yeah.
But The other thing was, I can't help but feel it's not coincidence that he looks a bit like Lord Lucan, who had disappeared only, was it the year before, 1974?
I never picked up on it, but now you say it, absolutely.
I won't say he's the dead spit, but he's not unlike that. But of course, he's trying to look like sort of upper crust. Anyway, the point is, as you've gathered, the show is all about class and Cleese's consciousness about class and wanting to improve the classiness of his establishment. So what I should say is, whilst wanting to improve the tone, the class of his clientele and the whole establishment, John Cleese is also simultaneously on the phone to if not the brickie himself, someone involved in a company, which is a construction company, who Cleese accuses them of just effectively dumping bricks without building a wall out of them. So you've got this simultaneous thing, clever bit of writing, him on the phone to the builder, and also the customer, who turns out to be, well, possibly the very kind of person Cleese might want to attract.
Yes. The flu. Yes. Both names, please. Yes, I should have guessed, Mr. O'Reilly, that of the potato famine, I suppose.
Yeah, I beg your pardon?
Would you put both your names, please? Well, will you give me a date?
Yeah, I only use one.
You don't have a first name.
No, I'm Lord Melbury, so I simply sign Melbury.
Go away. I'm so sorry to captivate your lordship. I do apologise. Please do accept my forgiveness. Now, is there anything that I can do for you? Anything?
Yes, well, I have filled this in.
Oh, please don't bother with that. Now, a room, a special room, a single, a double, a suite? Well, we don't have any suites, but we have some beautiful doubles.
Oh, no, just a single.
Just a single, absolutely. How very wise, if I may say so, Your Honour.
Yeah, with a bath?
Oh, naturally. Naturellement.
Well, I shall be staying for 1 or 2 nights.
Please. Manuel!
I love that when he refers to O'Reilly, of course, played by the... Do you ever remember O'Reilly, that Mr. O'Reilly, there's an episode where he has the door moved to the kitchen, and it's O'Reilly's men that he gets to do it.
That's nice.
Yeah, and he's played by an Irish actor, sadly no longer with us, called David Kelly, who used to play the one-armed washer-up in Robin's Nest, with the wonderfully entitled Albert Riddle.
Right.
So I just, when he mentioned O'Reilly, there's a pendulum in Fawlty Towers. I don't know if you've noticed this, but and it swings between the slapstick, ridiculous, jumping about, leaping about, and then very clever, as you say, there's very clever writing in there. This whole thing about how, he's so enamoured with the upper class, and how there's a lovely scene where Melbury goes into the bar and he says, "Can I get you an aperitif?" And Melbury says, "Oh, I'll have a dry sherry or something." And Cleese goes, Basil Fawlty says, "Oh, of course. What else? It's like even the drink is genius. It's just lovely, isn't it? There's some tiny little, and as I say, there's this pendulum between the big slapstick, larking about, jumping about, shouting and screaming, and then it swings the other way to these kind of like micro, just tiny, clever little pieces of comedic writing that it's brilliant, brilliant in places."
Might that be the sub-headline, "Brilliant in Places" for you?
Yeah. I mean, to make it work with the title, it sounds worse than it is. I mean, there is just part of me that just kind of thinks it's good, but it's not that good. You know what I mean? I think people kind of get carried away with it. I think people who maybe don't really get comedy think, "Oh yeah, everybody says about Fawlty Towers, so I can go, oh yeah, it's the best comedy ever, and therefore I know comedy." Do you know what I mean? It's that. I do wonder whether people kind of jump on that bandwagon in a way. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure there can be a bit of that, just as I don't know. I always felt, and this might be unfair, and I'll offend large swathes of the audience, but hey, that's pretty much a situation normal for me. But music students who love classical music, if you ask them, "What pop music do you like?" Well, it used to be this. I'm going back a bit. when I was at university, okay, going back a huge bit, they'd always say the Beatles, because that's a soft option, isn't it? Or for, and it's tempting to say it's music for people who don't like music, but at the same time, I think the Beatles are genius. So, if you're going to pluck something out of the air, you might as well pluck something rather good. So dare one ask, in our somewhat special 150th episode, what you would put at the top of your poll for the greatest sitcom? Do we need to even say British sitcom? No, it could be greatest sitcom, full stop, for Shane O'Connor.
I agree with you. I don't think you can. I think it's a ridiculous thing anyway. I think we talked about this in a previous episode where if you said, what's the greatest song ever written? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's that ludicrous, isn't it, really?
Yeah, but if you were sitting around, if you were back in a pub and everyone else was doing it, you might feel obliged to come up with something. But I'm not going to push you any further if you're really unhappy to do that.
No, I mean, I don't know. It'd probably be something... oh, dear.
I've done it now, haven't I?
Yeah, it'd probably be something... It'd probably be somebody like Coogan standing, that kind of work, I think, probably.
Yeah.
It might not be Partridge, because I think that's maybe a little bit... I'm watching series 2 of This Time with Alan Partridge, which I still can't warm to. But yeah, I do. I don't know. I just kind of think, make something from somebody like that who's got a huge body of work to go at. I mean, what about you? What would you say?
Oh gosh, yeah. I forgot that it might rebound on me to ask this question. Well, it sounds too obvious to say I agree, but certainly, yeah, someone that has I like that phrase, great body of work. Slabbing League of Gentlemen last week I really enjoyed, but it is a ridiculous question. Yeah, it's like, what would you do if you won the lottery? Nobody really knows, and some people think that's the ultimate pub bore question, but hey, doesn't stop me asking it from time to time. Anyway, let's do scores, which will give us some idea of if it's in the O'Connor pantheon at all, or, that's what I call quite good, to quote an album title, I think.
I would say I'm going to go for a middle of the road, straight down the middle. It's 2.5 for me.
Gosh, even more economical than I thought you might be.
And that can sound, it sounds a bit like kind of miserable and wicked, but
that's who you are. Oh, sorry.
I am miserable and wicked. Yes. I just kind of think, it's good. It's not the best that's ever been done, but it's good. It's solid. There are bits you can enjoy. It's well cast. It's Connie Booth is 80, believe it or not, if you want to feel old.
No way.
Yeah. So
and she's the pretty young thing there.
I know. It's crazy, isn't it, really? So, yeah, I mean, that's all I've got to say, really. I mean, I enjoy it. I watch it. I know it probably a little bit too well now as well. Maybe that's part of the...
over-familiarity, yeah.
Yeah, it's probably it's a bit jaded in my mind a bit as well. But, 2.5 from me.
Okay, well, I'm going to give it a good old 4 out of 5, which coincidentally I did for League of Gentlemen. So 80%. I think I haven't got this sense that you've got of perhaps knowing it too well. So who'd have thought? What made me very uncool in school days, not knowing any of the lines to quote the following day, very often not having seen it at all. Perhaps that's to my advantage now, and I come to it with a slightly fresher eye. The other thing I want to say is really nice use of the set, as in how big the reception area is. By TV standards, again, all the caveats of 1975 and all of that, and the budgets the British economy was not quite on its knees, but it was struggling. And they wouldn't have had silly money to splash around, but I think they put the value on screen. And the nice little side room. These are all sort of things that make it run more smoothly than it might do otherwise. So, 4 out of 5 from me. Deservedly a classic, but nothing's flawless.
There's a lovely scene where he ends up lending Lord Melbury 200 quid. And I thought, I wonder what 200 quid, what in 75. And I just had a quick Google around to have a look. You could buy an Indus fridge freezer for £109 from Curry's. You could buy a Hot Point Supermatic twin tub washing machine.
You've gone to town on research.
For 122 quid. Or if you wanted to push the boat out, you could buy a Hoover Automatic Deluxe washing machine for about £145. And you at £259 would buy you a 22-inch. 22-inch, that's massive. Ultra colour TV from Curry's, if you wanted to.
Not just colour, but ultra colour.
Ultra colour, yeah.
Which is nearly as good as Technicolor. Well, but don't forget, all of those things came down in price the more they made of them. So 200 quid is still a lot of money.
It was a lot of money, yeah.
Okay, right. Well, thank you, Your Lordship. It remains to ask what you're setting for the homework for next week for me and the others.
Let me give you some tasters then. This is another radio transfer, believe it or not, a radio transfer with a twist. Oh. So it wasn't a straight radio transfer. Started off on Radio 4, but it was a fictional character on radio. When he was on Radio 4, in actual fact, he attracted a huge number of complaints because they were disgusted that Radio 4 had put this kind of program on, thinking that it was the program that it purported to be rather than the comedy program that it was.
It wouldn't be Down the Line, would it?
It would.
The phone-in show.
Which went to TV and became...
Oh, gosh. I was tempted to say Phone Jacker. That's an entirely different thing. But I can't think what it did on TV Land, or for a moment.
Well, Down the Line, of course, was hosted by the fictional character played by Rhys Thomas, Gary Bellamy. And the TV show became Bellamy's People.
Right, which I think I can't have seen.
The TV one. It stars Rhys Thomas, Felix Dexter, the late Felix Dexter. Charlie Higson, Paul Whitehouse, Adol Ray as well. I didn't realise, but then it kind of makes sense. But more of that next week. And we're going to go for, I think it only ran for one series, and we're going to go for episode 7 of Bellamy's People.
Bellamy's People, episode 7. Looking forward to putting that on the Slab of Comedy. Right, well, we are at Comedy Slab on Twitter. Do follow us there. We like tweeting out gags. Sometimes it's the sad news of a parting of a great artiste. But anyway, it's quality over quantity. We won't take up too much of your time with frivolities, or will we? Anyway, so at Comedy Slab, also the same handle for our Facebook page. Do like us there, as well as following us on Twitter. We'd love you to recommend the show to friends and family, and they would love you too, we like to think. And also a nice, generous, whopping star rating, if you'd be so kind. Bit of reverse psychology there. Or it's up to you. Actually, it's up to you, isn't it?
I don't know what to do now. I'm not really quite sure. Do I do it or not? I don't.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know which way works, but anyway. Yeah. Do what you'll do. Obviously, what will be. Que sera, sera. But if you could give us a mention on Apple Podcast or iTunes, that would be fab too.
Hopefully, I'll be back with you next week, along with Adrian. But obviously, he's training me up. I'm from Barcelona. And so a lot of people don't know that we slab these programs and then we go and act out scenes together. So he'll be chasing me around the house and slapping me about a bit, but no change there. Then he seems to do that every week, no matter what we slab.
That's why we're a couple of slapheads. I did hear this is not a hilarious payoff, but it's interesting. It's true. I heard it from the inside. If you remember, comedians going out on tour. Please God, may that be happening. The other side of the pandemic, which we hope is in its end game in the UK and beyond. But Harry Hill always used to make, when he was on tour, just a bit of fun with the crew he was working with, supporting artists and so on. He would remake a film classic on video. The work ethic is amazing. It wasn't enough just to be playing in front of thousands of people and touring the country and so on. He'd be making a film as he went.
That's how people describe me. Strange but true.
Strange, certainly. Yeah, I'm not sure about the true bit.